Okay, next up is going to be The Otherworlder, Exploring the Dungeon, Volume Number 1, a light novel, written by Hinagami Asami. There we go. It is 330 pages. It is $8.99. It is not available on Kindle Unlimited. You can only buy this. And that's because it's a translation of a story that's already existing. And here is the novel description. Ready for anything except this. Strapped for cash, Soya signs up for a shady gig straight out of a video game. Warp to a fantasy world with a team of experts and ascend a dungeon tower to make off with its spoils. However, an accident in the transfer process leaves him stranded there alone. Desperate for support, he recruits a host of adventurers, from elven sisters banished from the forest to a goddess of deception and secrecy partial to a lazing about as a cat, to form a party that can brave the tower's perils. Co-op between corrupt nobles and merchants outside the dungeon and deadly monsters within, can this motley band rise to the challenge? Or will Soya adventures end before it even begins? There we go. That's actually a pretty succinct description of the story. First of all, I kind of gave this a shot. I've been seeing a lot of these stories that are translated from Korean and Japanese and Chinese that are light novels originally. And so they've been translated, and it's an expensive process to do in trans. So I understand the high price tag. And they're translated in English, and sometimes they do really well. But a lot of times, because they're not in Kindle Unlimited, I don't always know if they're going to be LitRPG. So I decided to give this one a shot. I looked at the cover. I'm like, it kind of looks like a notification there screen. I recall maybe like reading this as a manga or something, or as an online webcomic, and I gave it a shot. It's not actually LitRPG. And as I'm reading the end of the story, the author mentions they actually go out of their way to minimize anything game light intentionally, because they wanted to focus on the stranger and the strangeland kind of aspect and the character development more than just like action, LitRPG game stuff, even though they're not using the word LitRPG. So the best you get in that aspect is the fact that this is a very familiar kind of setup. It's an Isekai world where the main character is transported to this magical fantasy world. And he goes dungeon diving, on tower diving, fights for resources, a little bit of adventure here and there, but it's kind of a minimal part of the story. And there's an adventurer guild that's sort of set up to organize these things, and they give characters different levels of like rankings and stuff. And there's like a kind of, I'm gonna say progression system, but like a way to record a person's abilities and skills and who their deity is, so that everybody in the party knows that they're being truthful about who they say they are, essentially. But that's kind of the only like hard-coded progression in the story. There's like a little bit of power progression, the main character getting new equipment and getting new allies and just becoming better at what he does, as far as like dungeon diving or his interactions with this world. But that's as far as you get for progression, unfortunately. And so for me, that was a little disappointing, but there are other aspects of the story I think people will find kind of cute. Again, most of the story is, again, kind of a stranger in the strange land kind of aspect, where the main character, who's supposed to arrive with like this team of researchers from Earth, arrives alone. Everyone else either dies or is sent somebody else. Is not clear in the novel. He gets a robot AI companion to help him out a little bit, to like do food preparation, analyzation to make sure he can eat things, some emergency first aid. He has rations and weapons and stuff from Earth. But it really is him trying to figure out how to survive in this world and how to interact with the locals and what are their structures for societies and rules and interactions with the different species. And so there's a lot of like nice world development, character development, and interaction with this world. But that's a lot. That really is what a lot of the story is like the main character just learning how to change and how to interact, and the relationships that he develops with these other characters. Sometimes, a lot of times, female. But again, it's cute, it's light, it's not a heavy story, and it's a light novel, so it's kind of what I expected. But the relationship development is probably going to be the biggest draw for readers who like that kind of stuff. Probably not the action adventure. That's definitely on the minimalist side of things. Overall, The story misses for me as somebody who loves LitRPG. Those aspects just didn't exist, and not that the story said it was, but I would have loved to have seen that part of it a little bit more, obviously. But even discounting that as a story as a negative, a big thing for me is the fact that it's a really expensive story. It's almost $9 for 330 pages, and for me, who likes to, I think a reasonable page value is like a penny a page, which for this book will come out to like 330, 4, maybe 450, I suppose, which is probably the upper limit for me. But this story is almost twice that. And I understand that the translating expensive, so there is an extra cost there. But for me, I didn't think it was worth the expensive price tag. Had this been on Kindle Unlimited, or if it was just like a slightly lesser price tag, I think it would have squeaked by with like a low 7 score, because it doesn't do anything wrong. And by the end of the story, I thought, okay, that was a cute ending, with the way his interactions ended up developing. But for now, unfortunately, at this price point, it just wasn't worth it for me. So it gets a score of 6 out of 10. That's The Otherworlder, Exploring the Dungeon, volume number 1, light story with a score of 6 out of 10. Doesn't quite work for me at this particular price point, but it might work for you. You never know. So there you go.